It was 2:47 inches the morning when Cassie carried Lily through the emergency room doors. Her little girl was burning with fever. Her own sneakers were held together with strips of silver duct tape. A man across the waiting room looked down at those shoes, and he froze. It wasn't the fever. It wasn't the tape. It wasn't the woman at the desk who just muttered something cruel under her breath. It was the shoes. The exact same shoes his mother wore the day she lay down for the last time, and never stood up again. If this story already has you, like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Harrison Webb was 52 years old. He owned 11 hospitals, and almost no one knew his face. He didn't do galas. He didn't cut ribbons for the cameras. He didn't stand at a podium with a gold shovel while photographers shouted his name. He didn't put his face on billboards. He didn't put his name on a single lobby wall. Not one. The hospitals he built carried other names: Mercy, St. Agnes, Eleanor General. He wrote the checks and let other people take the photographs. He wanted the beds full and the doors open. He never wanted the applause. Reporters had tried, for years, to figure him out. They couldn't. No scandal, no yacht, no island, no third divorce, no name in the tabloids. Just a man worth $2.6 billion who drove a 9-year-old sedan and ate lunch alone every Sunday in the same diner booth by the window. They wrote that he was private. They wrote that he was cold. They were wrong on both. Harrison wasn't cold. He was grieving, and he had been grieving for a very long time. Her name was Eleanor. She was his mother, and she had been a night shift nurse for 31 years. 31 years of walking in when the rest of the world walked out. 31 years of holding the hands of strangers at 3 in the morning, wiping fevered foreheads, closing eyes that would not open again. She came home smelling of antiseptic and burnt coffee, her feet swollen, her back bent like a question mark. And still, somehow, she smiled. She raised him alone. His father was a word she never said. She worked doubles so he could have shoes that fit. She worked holidays so he could have a coat. She sat under a bare kitchen bulb and helped him with math she didn't understand, one finger tracing the numbers, the two of them figuring it out together. She used to tell him one thing: take care of people, baby. That's the whole job. Everything else is just noise. He built an empire out of that one sentence. One clinic became two, two became a network. The network became a hospital. One hospital became 6. 6 became 11. And every ribbon he refused to cut, every wall he left blank, every camera he turned away from, was for her. Because Eleanor never got the applause either. She just did the work and went home and did it again. She died the year before he bought his first hospital. 1 year too late. Her heart gave out. In a small apartment she wouldn't let him upgrade. A nurse's badge still hanging by the door. A pair of white shoes beside the bed. He could have given her everything. A house. A garden. A single day where she didn't have to stand for 12 hours straight. He had it all. 1 year too late. That was the math that lived in him. The kind you can't renegotiate. The kind money can't move. So no, Harrison Webb did not do galas. And the reason he was sitting in an emergency room at almost 3 in the morning, in a plain gray jacket, looking like nobody, was simple: his grandson, Ethan, 7 years old, too fast on a bike he'd been told twice to slow down on, over the handlebars in the driveway, chin split open. Nothing serious, stitches, a brave face, a great popsicle waiting on the other side of it. Harrison had driven him himself, sat in the waiting room while they cleaned the cut, and he was staring at the far wall, thinking about nothing, thinking about Eleanor, when the doors slid open and a young woman walked in with a sick child in her arms. He didn't build his fortune to be seen. He built it so no one would have to stand where his mother stood. That was on purpose. She came in fast, out of the cold, a little girl folded against her chest. Harrison looked up. He didn't mean to. Movement at the door, that was all. But his eyes went down, the way eyes do, and they stopped at her feet. Her shoes. They were held together with tape, silver duct tape, wound twice around the toe of the left shoe, the edge already peeling up and curling back on itself. Running shoes? Once. Now the sole had come loose at the front, and it flapped, just slightly, with every step she took. Open, shut, like a small mouth trying to say something. Through a split in the fabric near the little toe, you could see a sliver of sock, gray, thin, wet at the edge from the slush outside. Harrison didn't see a pair of shoes. He saw a resume. He read them the way some men read a bank statement. He read the winters in them, the double shifts, the rain those shoes had walked through because there was no money for new ones and wouldn't be for a long time. He read the choice worn into every strip of that tape, new shoes, or something for the child. And he knew, before he knew a single other thing about her, which one she had picked. She shifted the girl higher onto her hip. The child was maybe 4, flushed, limp, one cheek pressed to her mother's collarbone, breathing too fast, too shallow. The mother balanced her there with one arm and reached for the clipboard with the other. Her hand was shaking. Not from the cold, from something older than cold. Her fingernails were trimmed short and clean, but 2 of them were cracked straight down the middle. Her jacket was zipped to the throat, except the zipper had given out halfway, so it hung open at the collar, and she kept tugging it closed with her free hand. A small, tired gesture, the kind you stop noticing you make. She had given up on new. She had not given up on clean. She held a paper ticket in 2 fingers, a number, B14. She looked at it the way some people look at a lottery slip, like it might be the thing that finally goes her way. Like it probably won't. The pen wouldn't write at first. She shook it, tried again, filled in the boxes one-handed, the girl's weight pulling her sideways the whole time. Name, date of birth, reason for visit, fever, 3 days, getting worse. And under the fluorescent lights, in a room that smelled of bleach and old coffee, 2 things sat in the same frame. On the woman's foot, a shoe wrapped in duct tape. On Harrison's wrist, hidden under his sleeve, a watch worth more than the car she had driven here in. He hadn't worn it to be seen. He'd forgotten he had it on. And now he couldn't stop feeling the weight of it against his skin. $26,000, ticking quietly, 1 room away from a shoe held together with tape. He looked at the watch, then at the shoe. Then he pulled his sleeve down, slow, until the watch was gone. She lowered herself into a chair near the wall. The girl whimpered. The mother pressed her lips to the small hot forehead and whispered something no one else could hear. Harrison couldn't hear it either, but he'd seen the shape of those words on his own mother's mouth. 1,000 times. In 100 rooms just like this one. And something in his chest, welded shut for years, began, very quietly, to come apart. She had a name. Cassie. He didn't know it yet. Almost no one in that room did. She sat with the girl and she waited. And a few seats down, another mother waited too. Another sick kid. A phone in one hand. Tired. Impatient. The kind of tired that goes looking for someone to blame. Her eyes found Cassie, traveled down, landed on the shoe. And she said it just loud enough to carry. Can't afford shoes, but you can afford a kid? The words hung there. Ugly. Public. The whole room heard it. A man by the vending machine looked up. The nurse at the desk paused for half a second. And Cassie, who had heard some version of that sentence her whole life, did not fire back. She didn't defend herself. She didn't crumble. She just pulled the little girl closer, tucked the small hot face under her chin, and looked straight ahead at nothing at all. A single tear slid down and disappeared into her daughter's hair. Because here is what that stranger didn't know. Cassie worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a warehouse, evenings at a diner. A 3rd shift stocking shelves when the 3rd shift came. $14 an hour when the hours came at all. $890 a month for 1 bedroom in a building where the heat worked when it felt like it. No insurance, no cushion, no family with a spare room. Nothing behind her but her own 2 feet and the tape holding them together. And she did the math the way only the poor learn to do it. In her head, constantly, never resting. Diapers meant no bus pass. A bus pass meant walking. A doctor's copay meant no groceries that week. New shoes for herself meant no medicine for the girl. So she'd wound the tape around the toe 1 more time and told herself the shoe still walked. And it did. It walked to the warehouse. It walked to the diner. It walked to the pharmacy at midnight. It had walked, tonight, into this emergency room at 2:47 in the morning with a feverish child who could not wait for the sun. She hadn't bought herself anything new in over a year. Not shoes, not a coat, not a coffee she didn't split into 2 mornings. Every dollar had a name, and the name was never hers. She sat there and she counted, silently, the way she always did. Every shift meant a night she wasn't there to tuck her daughter in. Every dollar meant a thing she said no to, so the girl could hear yes. Every taped seam on that shoe meant 1 more month of medicine in the cabinet. She counted all of it, the whole quiet ledger of a life spent going without, and she said nothing, because saying something cost energy she did not have. And because she had learned, a long time ago, that real dignity doesn't argue, it just keeps holding the child. The woman down the row went back to her phone, satisfied. She thought she'd won something. She hadn't. She'd just said the cruelest, true-sounding thing in a room full of people too tired to correct her. And then, from somewhere against Cassie's chest, a small cracked voice. The girl lifted her head, half an inch. Her eyes were glassy with fever, barely open. She looked down, past her mother's arm, at the shoe with the tape on it, and she whispered, "Mama, your shoe has a boo-boo." Cassie closed her eyes. Of everything that had happened in that room, that was the thing that nearly broke her. Not the stranger, not the bill she already knew was coming. Her sick little girl, burning up, looking at the tape on her mother's shoe and worrying about it. "Shh," Cassie breathed. "It's fine, baby, it doesn't hurt." But it did. Somewhere it did. And across the room, a man in a gray jacket, a man who owned 11 hospitals and could not save the one person he'd built them all for, went very, very still, because he had seen that shoe before. 30 years before, he was 6 years old, sitting on a hard plastic chair in a hospital corridor, waiting for his mother's shift to end, and Eleanor came down the hall toward him in her white nursing shoes. And even then, even that small, Harrison had noticed the tape. White shoes, cracked at the seam. A strip of medical tape wound around the left toe where the leather had split, painted over with white shoe polish so it wouldn't show under the lights. It always showed anyway. She wore those shoes for 15 years. 15 years. She could have bought new ones. That was the part that undid him now, the same as it had undone him then, once he was old enough to understand it. She had the money for 1 pair. Once a year, maybe. But every time the shoe money came, something else came with it. A textbook he needed for school. A field trip slip with a number written at the bottom. A winter coat he'd already outgrown. And every single time, Eleanor chose the same way. She wound another strip of tape around her own toe, and she bought the thing for him. She'd sit on the edge of her bed at the end of a double shift, and she'd inspect the tape like a mechanic checking an engine, and she'd say, "This one's got a few more miles in it, baby." And she'd smile like it was nothing. Harrison used to think it was nothing, too. Children believe their mothers. He believed the shoes were fine. He believed she liked those shoes. He believed her when she said her feet didn't hurt. He was in his 20s before he understood that a woman who stands 12 hours a night on a hospital floor does not have feet that don't hurt. He was in his 30s, in a boardroom, in a chair that cost more than a month of her old rent, before it fully landed on him that every strip of tape on those shoes had been a small deposit made into his future, made silently, made without one word of complaint, made at a cost she never once let him see. And once, only once, he had watched a stranger look at those shoes the way that woman just looked at Cassie's. He was 9. They were in a grocery line. His mother was counting change onto the belt, slow, careful, quarter by quarter. And a man behind them, impatient, in a hurry, looked down at Eleanor's taped white shoes and made a sound. Just a sound. A little breath through the nose. And then a sentence Harrison never forgot. Something about people who couldn't take care of themselves having no business holding up the line. Same fluorescent hum, same taped shoes, same look from a stranger who had no idea what he was looking at. Eleanor hadn't answered him. She'd finished counting her change, paid, Doc in Harrison's hand, and walked out into the cold with her chin level and her back straight. And it was only years later that Harrison understood her silence had never been weakness. It had been the loudest kind of strength there is, the kind that refuses to hand a cruel man the one thing he came for, a reaction. He'd buried his mother in those shoes. He hadn't been able to part with them, They were hers in a way nothing he could afford ever would be. So he'd buried her in the white shoes with the tape on the toe, and standing at that grave, in a suit that cost more than she'd made in a year, he had made himself a promise that no one would ever look at a woman like that again, not if he had the power to stop it. And here he was, all the power in the world, and it was happening again, right in front of him, a stranger saying the cruel thing, a good mother holding her chin level and saying nothing, a child watching, learning too early what the world charges people who have too little. 30 years. And the tape had never come off the world. The girl in the woman's arms coughed, and Harrison came back to the room. And he understood, finally, why he had frozen. Now step back from the room for a second. Because this part isn't a story. This part is real. Right now, in the richest country on Earth, roughly 25 to 27 million people are walking around with no health insurance at all. Not because they're lazy. Most of them work. They work the jobs that don't come with benefits. The warehouse jobs, the diner jobs, the cleaning jobs, the 2 and 3 jobs, stitched together jobs. They work harder than most people you'll ever meet. And they walk into every clinic holding their breath. Because in America, getting sick is expensive in a way that can end a life without touching the body. Medical debt is one of the leading reasons people here file for bankruptcy. Let that sit for a second. Not gambling, not luxury, not bad choices. Getting sick. A single trip to an emergency room can cost more than a family earns in 3 months. 1 ambulance ride, 1 overnight stay, 1 scan. And a working parent who did everything right is suddenly buried under a number with no way out from under it. So people do the thing you are never supposed to do. They wait. They hope the fever breaks on its own. They Google symptoms at 2 in the morning and pray, because the alternative is a bill that could cost them the apartment. Cassie had done that for 3 days. 3 days of cool washcloths and children's Tylenol split into careful doses. 3 days of watching and waiting and hoping she wouldn't have to make the choice she was about to make. She held out as long as a mother possibly can. And then the fever climbed past the number where hoping stops being an option. But here is the part almost nobody tells you, the part that matters most. Millions of those people qualify for help right now. Today, and they don't know it. There are children eligible for free or near-free coverage whose parents have never been told it exists. There are working mothers who assume they earn too much to qualify, or too little, or that they'd be turned away, or judged, or reported to someone. So they never ask. They never fill out the form. Study after study finds the same thing. A huge share of the uninsured are actually eligible for a program already sitting there with their name on it. They just never walked through the door, because no one ever told them the door was theirs to walk through. The help exists. The door is open. And the people who need it most are standing outside in the cold, in taped shoes, certain the door was never meant for them. That's the cruelest part of the whole machine. It's not that there's no help. It's that the help is invisible to the exact people drowning without it. That was Cassie. She was one of those numbers, and she had no idea. Somewhere in a county office was a program that could have covered her daughter, waiting, quietly, month after month, and she had spent a year choosing between medicine and rent, wearing tape on her shoes, skipping her own meals, convinced she was on her own, while a door stood open 1 town over, and nobody had ever told her where to look. She didn't think there was a system. She thought this was just what her life was. She thought help was something that happened to other people, in other stories, with other endings. She thought she was alone. She was not alone. She just didn't know it yet. And in about 90 seconds, at a reception desk, under buzzing fluorescent lights, that quiet, invisible truth was going to start, very slowly, to change. Cassie, the nurse at the desk called. "You can bring her up, hon." Cassie stood, adjusted the girl on her hip, walked to the counter with the clipboard held against her chest like a shield. The nurse was kind, you could tell. Reading glasses on a chain, a voice worn soft by too many nights like this one. She took the paperwork, scanned it, typed, and then she asked the question. The one Cassie had been dreading since the parking lot. "Do you have insurance?" Cassie didn't answer right away. She looked at the girl in her arms, at the small flushed face, at the little chest rising and falling too fast. Then she shook her head. Once. Small. No, she said. Quiet. No, I don't. She said it the way you confess something, not because it was shameful, but because she knew what came next. The nurse's face didn't change. She'd heard it 1,000 times. She just nodded, gently, and kept typing. But the room changed. Cassie felt it change, because now the math started running behind her eyes, the way it always did, faster than she could stop it. She'd looked up the number in the car, in the dark, on her cracked phone, one-handed, while the girl burned against her. An emergency room visit. No coverage. Around $2,300, give or take. More than a month of rent, more than 2 weeks of both jobs combined. More than she had. More than she would have for a long, long time. She could see it already. The envelope. The number in bold. The payment plan she couldn't keep. The calls. The slow, grinding math of a debt that follows you, like a shadow that learned your name. $2,300. She felt it drop into her chest like a stone into a well. She heard it hit the bottom, and still. She didn't leave. She couldn't leave. Because the math didn't matter anymore. Not tonight. Her daughter was sick, and there was one door, and she had walked through it, and she would figure out the rest the way she figured out everything. Later. Alone. Somehow. Okay, the nurse said softly. Let me just get you. And that was when the girl spoke. She lifted her head off her mother's shoulder, just an inch. Her eyes were half open, glassy, far away with fever. She wasn't looking at the nurse. She wasn't looking at the room. She was looking down. At her mother's shoes. At the tape. And in a small, cracked, feverish whisper, she said the thing that stopped the whole room cold. It's okay, Mama. A breath. My feet aren't cold. Cassie went completely still. Because the girl had been watching. This whole time. Burning up, half asleep, and still watching. She had seen the tape, and the split fabric, and the sliver of gray sock. And somewhere in her small, fevered head, she had decided the thing worth worrying about was not her own fever. Not the hospital. Not the strangers. It was whether her mama's feet were cold. She was 4 years old, and she was trying to comfort her mother. Cassie pressed her mouth to the top of her daughter's head and held it there. Held it there so no one in that room would see her face come apart. Her shoulders didn't shake. She didn't make a sound. She just breathed into her daughter's hair, slow and shaking, holding the whole thing in the only way she knew how. The nurse looked down at her keyboard, gave her a moment. Some kindnesses are just that, looking away at the right time. And then, a hand came to rest on the counter. Beside the nurse, a man's hand, older, steady, the cuff of a plain gray sleeve, and beneath it, for just a second before it disappeared, the edge of something that caught the light. He leaned in, and he said something to the nurse. Low. So low that no one in the waiting room could hear it. 6 words, maybe 7. The nurse blinked, looked up at him, looked back at her screen, and nodded. Nobody knew who he was. Not the woman on the phone, not the man by the vending machine, not Cassie, still holding her daughter, eyes closed, whispering that her feet weren't cold either. Not yet. He didn't announce it. That was the whole point. The thing Harrison said to the nurse, the 6 or 7 words no one else could hear, was simple. That little girl gets seen. Now, whatever the bill is, it's handled. And the mother is not to know it came from me. The nurse started to say something. A question, maybe a name for the paperwork. He shook his head. Once. Not unkindly, just final. No name. No form for the mother to sign. No moment where a wealthy man gets to stand over a poor woman with his hand out and his good deed showing. He had watched people try to give his own mother charity like that a few times in his life. Watched the way it made her shrink. Watched her thank them with a smile that cost her something. He had sworn, a long time ago, that he would never do that to anyone, because dignity, he'd learned, isn't only about whether you give. It's about how. Give it wrong, and you take more than you hand over. So he didn't walk over. He didn't crouch down and introduce himself. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He didn't make a speech about hard times and good people. He simply turned the quiet machinery of a hospital he happened to own toward one sick 4-year-old. And then he stepped back into being nobody. He went and sat down. Within a minute, A nurse came through the inner doors. "Lily," she called, gently, reading the name off a chart. "We can take Lily now." Cassie's head came up, startled. I haven't finished the insurance." "It's taken care of, sweetheart," the nurse said. "Come on back." Cassie didn't move. She stood there, holding her daughter, searching the room for the catch. Because there was always a catch. There was always a bill later, a form, a fine print sentence that turned the kindness into a trap. Her eyes went around the room, quick, wary. Past the woman on the phone, past the vending machine, past a man in a gray jacket who was, at that exact moment, looking down and sliding his sleeve a little further over his wrist. Over a watch worth more than her car. Worth more than a year of the tape on her shoes. He didn't look up. He didn't want to. If their eyes met, she might know. And then the whole gift would curdle into charity, and he'd have taken the one thing she still had. So he studied the floor, studied the scuffed linoleum, studied his own hands, and let her wonder. She never suspected him. Why would she? He looked like nobody. That was by design. "Come on," the nurse said again, warmer. "Let's get that fever down." And something in Cassie finally loosened. She didn't understand it. She'd stopped expecting to understand good news a long time ago. But she carried her daughter toward the doors, and the doors opened, and the warm, bright hallway swallowed them both, and they were gone. Harrison sat back in the plastic chair. He let out a breath, a long one, the kind that feels like it's been held for 30 years. The watch ticked against his wrist. He didn't hear it. He was somewhere else entirely. He was 6 years old, on a hard chair in a corridor just like this one, watching a pair of taped white shoes come down the hall toward him. He looked at the doors where the woman and her daughter had disappeared. And very quietly, to no one, he said it. "You're not alone. You just don't know it yet." Then he waited for his grandson. And he said nothing else. An hour later, Lily was going to be fine. Fever down. Fluids in. A prescription in a small white paper bag, and a cartoon sticker pressed onto the back of one small hand. The nurse had crouched to her level and called her brave, and Lily had believed it, the way 4-year-olds do, and fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder before they even reached the doors. And Cassie carried her out to the parking lot, into the raw March dark, toward a Honda that was older than the marriage she'd never had, 210,000 miles, a door that only opened from the inside, a heater that took 10 minutes to decide whether it felt like working. She buckled Lily into the back, tucked the too big coat around her, pressed the back of one hand to the small forehead, and felt it, finally, blessedly, cool. Made sure the little chest was rising and falling easy now, slow and deep, the way it was supposed to. Then she got into the driver's seat. And she shut the door. And she came apart. No sound. That was the thing. She cried the way people learn to cry when sound costs something. When there's always a child in the next room. When there's never once, in your whole life, been anyone on the other side of the wall to hear it and come. Her shoulders shook. Her forehead came down against the top of the wheel. And nothing came out but breath, ragged and silent, fogging the cold windshield. Because she wasn't crying from fear anymore. The fear was over. Lily was okay. She was crying from the size of it. The whole weight of the year, set down for 1 minute, in a dark car. And in that minute, she remembered the last time she'd stood in a shoe store. 8 months ago. Lily's first bad fever. Cassie had walked in with exactly enough money for one thing. She'd stood in the aisle with a shoebox in her hands. Cheap ones, plain ones, the kind that would have replaced the pair already splitting on her feet. And her phone had buzzed with the pharmacy total. And she'd stood there, in the middle of the aisle, doing the only math she knew. Shoes. Or medicine. She put the box back on the shelf. She bought the medicine. And she wound another strip of tape around her toe in the parking lot, and she told herself the shoe still walked. Every dollar meant a choice she made in silence. Every shift meant a bedtime she missed, so the rent could get paid. Every taped seam on that shoe meant one more month her daughter got what she needed. Every dollar, every shift, every taped seam, all of it, for hair. And that day in the store, Lily had looked up at her, confused, and asked why Mama didn't get the new shoes, why they were leaving without them. Cassie had knelt down, right there in the aisle, and smiled, the real smile, the one that costs the most. "Mama doesn't need new shoes, baby," she'd said. These still walk just fine. They still walked. They'd walked her to the warehouse and the diner. They'd walked her through the slush to this parking lot tonight. They'd walked her daughter into a hospital and back out again. Safe, breathing easy, asleep in the back seat. They still walked just fine. Cassie lifted her head off the wheel, wiped her face with the back of one crack-nailed hand. In the rear-view mirror, her daughter slept, warm, safe, the fever broken, the small hand with its cartoon sticker curled loose against the seat. She looked at her for a long time. She didn't know about the man in the gray jacket. She didn't know about the watch, or the 11 hospitals, or the door standing open one town over with her daughter's name on it. She didn't know that anything at all had shifted in her small, hard, tape and coins life. She thought she was still alone. She turned the key. The old engine caught on the second try, and she whispered it one more time, to the dark, to the sleeping girl, to herself. These still walk just fine. Harrison didn't hire a private investigator. He didn't make a phone call to some man in a dark office. He did something quieter than that. He asked the hospital's own social work department to look into the case, not to dig, just to understand, just to see what door this woman might already qualify to walk through. It took them 2 days to build the picture. And when it landed on his desk, Harrison read it the way you read a letter you already know the ending of. Cassie, 29 years old, single mother, 2 children, 1 4, 1 7, 2 jobs, $14 an hour at the warehouse, a little less at the diner, and tips that came and went like weather. Credit score, 574, no savings, no partner, no emergency fund, and no emergency. Ever. That wasn't one. And no insurance. Not because she'd turned it down, because she'd fallen straight into the gap, earning just enough that one program said she made too much, earning far too little for anything she'd have to buy herself, caught in the exact place the system forgets on purpose, working full-time, and then some, in a country that had quietly decided a woman like her didn't count. Harrison set the page down, and he saw his mother, because he'd seen a file like this before. Not on paper, in real life. Lived, one long shift at a time. Eleanor, 30 years old, the year she had him alone. 2 jobs, a wage that never quite reached the bills. No savings, no partner, no cushion, ever. Caught in a version of the very same gap, working herself down to the bone in a country that had quietly decided a woman like her didn't count either. 2 women, 2 files, 30 years apart. Same missing partner, same 2 jobs, same nothing left over at the end of every month. Same quiet pride that never once asked for help because no one had ever told her help was hers to ask for. Same taped shoes, same fluorescent hum, same stranger, somewhere, ready to say the cruel thing. He laid Cassie's file beside the memory of his mother's life, and they matched like 2 prints of the same photograph, one faded, one still developing. And that was the thing that undid him. Not that Cassie's story was rare, that it wasn't. That it was the most common story in America, playing on a loop, in 1,000 waiting rooms, at 3 in the morning, in shoes held together with tape. His mother had lived it and died inside it. And here it was again, breathing, in a young woman he'd watched hold her chin level while a stranger tried to shame her. He had spent his whole life building hospitals so that no one would stand where his mother stood. And a woman had stood there anyway, in his own emergency room. If this story is hitting you right now, take 1 second and subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story we tell here. Now, back to Cassie, because the file told Harrison something else. Something that changed everything. It told him that Cassie qualified. Right now. Today. For coverage she had no idea existed. Her children, almost certainly, eligible. Herself, likely too, through a pathway she'd never been walked down, because no one had ever sat across a desk from her and said the words out loud. She wasn't asking for a handout. She'd never asked for anything. She just didn't know that a door had been standing open the whole time, one form away, with her daughter's name already fitting the blank. Harrison read the file one more time. Then he picked up the phone. Not to give her money. Money was the easy thing, the loud thing, The thing that makes the giver feel good and the taker feel small. He was going to give her something harder. He was going to make sure somebody finally showed her the door. It didn't come as a check. It came as a phone call. A woman named Renata, from the hospital's family resource office, called Cassie 2 days after Lily's fever broke. Warm voice. No rush in it. She said she was following up on the visit. She said there were some programs Cassie's family might qualify for, and would she be willing to come in and sit down for 20 minutes? Cassie almost said no. She'd learned that programs usually meant paperwork that went nowhere, and hope that cost more than it paid back. But she went. Because of Lily. Because you always go for them. Renata's office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a box of tissues that had clearly been needed before. She didn't talk down to Cassie. She didn't ask why she'd waited. She just opened a folder and started asking questions. Household size, income, the kids' ages. Cassie answered, bracing the whole time for the moment it fell apart. It always fell apart. It didn't. Renata looked at the numbers. Then she looked up and said the thing that changed the shape of Cassie's life. You qualify. Both kids, for sure. And you, too. You've qualified this whole time. Cassie didn't understand at first. She thought she'd misheard. For what? Medicaid, Renata said, gently, like she was handing over something breakable. It's health coverage. For you and the children. It's free. And you were eligible the whole time. Nobody ever told you. The room went very quiet. Because here is a truth almost nobody explains out loud. Medicaid is not charity. It is not a handout. It is not a favor anybody does you. It's a program you already pay into, that exists precisely for working people caught in exactly the place Cassie was caught. It was hers. It had been hers for years. And she had spent those years wrapping tape around a shoe and skipping her own meals, drowning 3 feet from a life raft that had her name written on the side. She had qualified the night Lily got sick. She had qualified the night she counted change in a Walmart line. She had qualified through every fever, every double shift, every choice between medicine and rent. Nobody had ever told her. Cassie put her hand over her mouth, and she cried. Not the silent kind this time. The other kind. The kind that comes out when a weight you've carried so long you forgot it was a weight is suddenly, impossibly, lifted off your back. And then the doors started opening, one after another. Renata helped her fill out the application right there. Then she pulled up another form. Then another. Cassie qualified for a card that would cover the children's checkups. She qualified for help with the emergency room bill she'd been dreading, the whole $2,300, folded quietly into a hospital assistance program she'd never heard of. She qualified for a food benefit she'd assumed was for other people. She qualified for a clinic that would see Lily for free. A card for the doctor. A card for the pharmacy. A number to call that actually answered. A person who actually knew her name. Every door she'd assumed was locked her whole adult life had been standing open. She'd just never been handed the map. She left that office holding a folder of papers like it was a newborn. In 3 weeks, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a card. Her name on it. Lily's name. A small rectangle of plastic that meant her daughter would never again get sick in a country that made her mother count coins to be seen. She held that card in her kitchen for a long time. She never once asked who'd made the call that started it. She assumed it was luck. A kind nurse. The system, finally, randomly working. She had no idea a man in a gray jacket had made sure of it, and then stepped back into being nobody. He didn't want the thank you. He'd never wanted the thank you. He'd only ever wanted the door to open. For a while, things got better. And then, the way life does, they got hard again. It was month 4, 2:14 in the morning. Cassie was sitting at her kitchen table under a bare bulb, and she was done. Not dramatically, quietly. The way people actually break. The coverage had helped. Of course it had. Lily was healthy. The old bill was gone, but the rent had gone up $90. The diner had cut her shifts. The warehouse wanted her on nights, and nights meant no one to watch the kids, and no one to watch the kids meant she couldn't take the nights, and not taking the nights meant less money, and less money meant she was right back at the table at 2 in the morning, with a calculator and a stack of envelopes and not enough. She'd thought getting the card would fix it. It fixed one thing. Life had 11 other things waiting. She stared at the numbers until they stopped meaning anything. And a voice in her head, low and tired and cruel, said the thing it always said on nights like this. You're not enough. Not enough hours. Not enough money. Not enough of a mother. Look at you. Tape on your shoes. A calculator at 2 a.m. Kids asleep in a room where the heat barely works. What kind of mother can't even? She put her head down on the table, and she thought, for the first time in a long time, about stopping. Not anything terrible, just stopping. Giving up the second job. Giving up the fight to keep the apartment. Calling her cousin 3 states away and asking, in a small voice, if there was a couch. Admitting she couldn't do it. That she'd tried. God knew she'd tried, and it hadn't been enough, because she hadn't been enough. The bulb hummed above her. The fridge kicked on. Somewhere down the block a car alarm went and stopped. And in the quiet, she heard her own voice, from 8 months ago, in a shoe store aisle, kneeling down, smiling the real smile. Mama doesn't need new shoes, baby. These still walk just fine. She lifted her head. These still walk just fine. She'd said that. She'd meant it. Not because the shoes were fine, because she was. Because a woman who could wrap tape around a shoe and walk 2 jobs and a sick child through a Boston winter was not a woman who was not enough. She was a woman who had been told, over and over, by a world that never once helped her, that her exhaustion was proof of her failure. And it wasn't. It never had been. The tape wasn't shame. The tape was proof. Proof that every single dollar had gone where it was supposed to go. To them. To the children asleep in the next room. She had never once spent that money on herself, and the world had looked at that and called it poverty, when what it actually was love. Stubborn, unglamorous, tape and coins love. She sat up straight. She didn't have an answer. The numbers on the table were still wrong. The rent was still $90 too high. Nothing about the morning would be easy. But she wasn't going to stop. She wiped her face. She stacked the envelopes. And she was reaching to turn off the bulb and lie down for the 3 hours of sleep she had left, when her phone lit up on the table. A text, from a number she half recognized. Renata, at the Family Resource Office. She almost didn't open it. It was 2 a.m. It could wait. She opened it. 3 lines. And by the second line, Cassie was sitting very still, reading it again. Her tired eyes suddenly wide awake in the dark kitchen, because what Renata had sent wasn't about a bill. It wasn't about a form. It was about a door Cassie didn't know existed. A different kind of door. One that didn't just change her month. It was going to change the whole rest of her life. The text was short. Renata had seen something. An opening, part-time, entry-level, at the very hospital where it all started. A family resource assistant. Someone to sit with scared people and help them find the doors. No degree required to start. They'd train the right person. And Renata had written one more line at the end. I thought of you. You'd be good at this. Maybe better than any of us. Cassie read it 4 times. She almost talked herself out of it before the sun came up. Who was she? Tape on her shoes. 2 jobs and a calculator at 2 a.m. She didn't have a degree. She barely had a car that started. But she remembered how it felt in that small office. The moment Renata said you qualify, you always did. She remembered the weight coming off her back, and she thought, quietly, if I could hand that feeling to even one other mother. She applied. She got an interview. She wore her one good blouse and the shoes with the tape hidden under long pants, and she told them the truth, that she knew this system from the inside, that she'd been the woman counting coins, that she'd fallen in the gap and clawed out of it and knew exactly how invisible the door was from down there. They hired her, and that was when the firsts began. For the first time, Cassie had a job with a badge that had her name on it. For the first time, she had health coverage that came from her own work. For the first time, she didn't lie awake doing the math, because for the first time, the math worked. Not by much, but it worked. For the first time, Lily saw her mother put on a lanyard in the morning and walk into a hospital, not as someone begging to be seen, but as someone people came to for help. For the first time in her adult life, Cassie was not the one drowning. She was the one on the shore, holding out her hand. The old emergency room bill, the $2,300 that had once felt like a wall she'd die against, was long gone, cleared through the assistance program. Handled, forgiven, a thing that used to steal her sleep, now just a line on a page somebody had crossed out. She still had the tape shoes. She didn't throw them away. She put them in the bottom drawer of her new desk. On the first day, before she'd even hung up her coat, she set them in there, toe with the silver tape facing up, and she left them. Because she knew, the way you know things you've lived, that there would be days this job broke her heart. Days a mother sat across from her and cried and said she couldn't do it anymore. And on those days, Cassie wanted to be able to open that drawer, look down at the tape, and remember exactly how far a pair of broken shoes can carry a person who refuses to quit. Renata caught her looking at them that first week. She didn't ask about the shoes. She just watched Cassie sit down across from a young mother, a scared one, thin jacket, tired eyes, and lean in and say, gently, in a voice that had earned every word of it, "Okay, let's figure this out together. I promise you, there are more doors than you think." Renata smiled, and on her way out, she said one thing, half to herself, that would sit in Cassie's chest for years. You know what you're really good at? You could do this for other families for the rest of your life. And it would never once feel like work. Cassie looked down at the drawer, at the tape, and for the first time, she believed it. 2 years later, same hospital, same emergency room, same front desk, same fluorescent lights, humming at that exact frequency only people who've spent too much time under them can hear. And a young mother came through the doors at 2:40 in the morning, a sick toddler on her hip. Cassie saw her before anyone else did. She saw the thin jacket, zipped to the throat because the lining was gone. She saw the tired eyes doing the math. She saw the paper ticket held in 2 fingers like a lottery slip. And she saw the shoes. She always saw the shoes first. These ones weren't taped. They were just old, split at the seam, soaked through from the slush outside. Cassie didn't need the file. She'd lived the file. She came out from behind the desk, not with a clipboard, not with a form, with 2 cups of the terrible hospital coffee, one of which she pressed into the young mother's free hand before the woman could even sit down. "Here," Cassie said. "It's awful. Drink it anyway. Warms you up." The mother blinked at her, suspicious, waiting for the catch. Cassie knew that look from the inside of her own skin. "I don't have insurance," the mother said, fast, getting it out before it could be used against her. "I know how this works. She was burning up. I didn't have a choice. I'll figure out the hay," Cassie said. Soft, she crouched down to the woman's level, the way somebody had once crouched to hers. "Look at me. Your baby's going to get seen. Tonight. That part's already true. The money part, we'll figure out after. And I promise you, right now, tonight, I promise, there are more doors than you think there are." The woman started to cry. The way you cry when someone is kind to you and you've forgotten what that feels like. Cassie got her back into a room, got the toddler seen. And then she sat with her in the small family office, the same kind of office she'd once sat in, and she opened a folder, and she started asking the gentle questions. Household size, income, the baby's age. And when the numbers came back the way Cassie already knew they would, she looked up and said the words. The same words. The ones that had once lifted a weight off her own back. "You qualify. You've qualified this whole time. Nobody ever told you. It's not charity. It's yours." The mother put her hand over her mouth. Cassie reached across the desk and held her other hand while she cried. Later, after the woman had gone home with a healthy baby and a folder of papers and a number that actually answered, Cassie sat alone at her desk in the quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. The night shift moved soft around her. She opened the bottom drawer. The tape shoes were still there. 2 years now. The silver tape had yellowed a little at the edges. She looked at them for a long moment, the way you look at a photograph of someone you used to be. Then she closed the drawer. She didn't need to wrap tape around anything anymore. She had good shoes now, warm ones, bought with her own paycheck. But she kept the old ones right there, one drawer away, for every night a mother walked through those doors, doing the math. Because Cassie had learned the thing the whole world gets wrong about people like her. The tape was never a sign of what she lacked. It was a receipt. Proof that everything she had, she'd spent on the two small people asleep at home. And now she got to stand at the exact spot where a stranger had once tried to shame her and hand the next mother something better than pity. She got to hand her the door, same desk, same hum, same broken shoes. Everything else changed. She found out by accident. She almost didn't find out at all. It was a fundraiser. Cassie had been asked to speak, just a few minutes, about the Family Resource Program. And afterward, an older man in a plain gray jacket came up to her. No entourage, no name she recognized. He shook her hand and told her she'd spoken well, and something in his face stopped her. "Do I know you?" she asked. He smiled, a tired, kind smile. "You don't, but I know you. I was in the waiting room the night your daughter had the fever. 2 years ago. I was the one who asked them to see her." Cassie went very still. "That was you," she whispered. "The bill, the card, Renata, all of it. That was you." "It was a phone call," Harrison said. "That's all. You did everything after." She didn't know what to say. 2 years of wondering, and here he was, an ordinary-looking man in an ordinary jacket, telling her he owned the hospital, telling her he'd built 11 of them, telling her none of it the way a rich man usually tells you things. Why? Was all she could manage. Why me? You didn't even know me. And so Harrison told her about Eleanor. About a night shift nurse who raised a son alone. About white shoes cracked at the seam, mended with medical tape and painted over with polish so it wouldn't show under the lights. About 15 years in those same shoes, because every time the shoe money came, it went to a textbook, a coat, a field trip slip instead. About a stranger in a grocery line who looked at those taped shoes and said something cruel while she counted her change. About a woman who never once answered back, who just took her son's hand and walked out with her chin level. About a son who made his first million 3 years too late to give her a single easy day. "I froze that night," Harrison said. "When you walked in, I looked down at your shoes, and I was 6 years old again, waiting in a hallway for my mother's shift to end. You were her, and I couldn't save my mother. She was already gone, but you were standing right there." Cassie was crying now, openly. "I didn't save you," Harrison said. "I want to be clear about that. You were already saving yourself. I just paid off a debt I owed my mother, 30 years late. I finally got to make sure one woman in taped shoes got looked at like she was worth looking at. They stood there, 2 people. One who'd worn the taped shoes, one who'd watched his mother wear them." Cassie thought about the 2 pairs. The white nursing shoes with the medical tape, the running shoes with the silver duct tape, 30 years and a whole world apart, and somehow the exact same shoes, a bridge between 2 mothers who never met, held together with tape and love and going without. That night, when she got home, Lily was still up, waiting. Cassie sat on the edge of the bed and told her, the short version, the version a kid could hold, that the man who'd helped them all that time ago had finally said hello, and Lily, older now, looked down at her mother's feet, at the good new shoes, and then, in a voice half asleep and completely certain, she said the thing that closed the whole circle. "You get new shoes now, Mama." A pause, a yawn. "Those old ones already walked us here." Cassie laughed and cried, both at once. Same words, almost. Shoes and walking and getting there. But this time, they weren't a lie a tired mother told to get through a hard night. This time, they were just true. I need to step out of the story for a moment. Because you should know something. Cassie isn't real. Harrison isn't real. Lily, Eleanor, the taped shoes, the 2:40 in the morning kitchen table. None of it happened. But the system it describes is real. All of it. Right now, in the richest country on earth, tens of millions of people are living without health insurance. Not because they're lazy. Most of them work. They work the jobs that don't come with benefits. They work harder than the people who judge them ever will. Medical debt is one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in America. Not luxury, not recklessness, getting sick. A single trip to an emergency room can cost a working family more than they earn in months. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Millions of those uninsured people qualify for help right now, today, through Medicaid or CHIP, and they don't know it. Eligible children, uninsured, because no one ever told their parents. Working mothers, convinced they earn too much or too little, who never fill out the form because they're certain the door isn't theirs. The help exists. The door is open, and the people who need it most are standing outside in the cold, in taped shoes, sure it was never meant for them. So hear this, if you hear nothing else. Being poor does not mean you don't deserve to be cared for. It never did. And sometimes the thing you need isn't someone's pity. It's not charity. It's just one person, sitting across a desk, willing to show you a right you already had. Medicaid is not a handout. It's a door. And doors are made to be walked through. If you're a parent tonight, doing the math at your own kitchen table, convinced you don't qualify, please, check. You might. Your kids almost certainly might. It costs nothing to find out, and it could change everything. And if that's not you, then think of someone it might be. The mother at the school pickup in the thin jacket. The coworker who splits her coffee into 2 mornings. The friend who waited 3 days on a fever because she was scared of the bill. Subscribe if this story meant something to you. And share it with a mama who thinks she doesn't qualify. She just might, and nobody has ever told her. Somewhere out there tonight, a woman is wrapping tape around a shoe and skipping her own dinner and telling her kids she's fine. She's not fine, but she's not weak either. And she is not alone, she just doesn't know it yet. Be the one who tells her. I'll see you in the next one.